Welcome to the CXR channel, our premier podcast for talent acquisition and talent management. Listen in as the CXR community discusses a wide range of topics focused on attracting, engaging, and retaining the best talent. We're glad you're here.
Everybody, welcome to another edition of the CXR podcast. I am Chris White, president of CXR. I have with me today JD, Jonathan Dale, who is actually VP of marketing at Phenom. And I'm making sure I don't get any of my bullets wrong. Who's going to join in? We're going to have a conversation. But what's throwing me for a loop is that we have a special guest joining JD today, who's normally sitting in the peanut gallery. You know him and you love him. It's Jerry Crispin. Jerry, how are you?
I'm wonderful. Life is good.
JD, how are you? Thanks for joining.
Yeah, I appreciate the invite. It's great to be here with everyone. Thanks.
Good stuff. So JD, before we jump in, share a little bit about who you are and what you do at Phenom, and maybe a little bit about how long you've been in there and what. And I'm going to throw another one at you. What you love about the space.
Yeah. Okay. First, thank you very much. Let's start with what we love about the space. I spent 18 years in IT and security space, going from answering telephones on Friday, Saturday, Sunday, weekend shifts to moving into product management, then product marketing, then marketing. So I've had a great pleasure of learning the IT buyers. And then 3 years ago, I transitioned to the HR space. And I'll say this, I thought the buyer and the user of IT and security products were difficult to talk to as a marketer. They're nothing compared to the HR industry and HR, nothing compared to them. This is so difficult of an industry.
I didn't expect that. I really thought you were going to go the other way with that.
No, not at all. But I'll tell you a funny here. My interactions previous to HR is anytime there's a problem with employees or something, right? It's like, okay, HR has to get involved. Because I was at a 400-person company that was acquired by a 400,000-person company. So my experience with HR was pretty limited. I've come to really appreciate and love this industry. And I've come to appreciate the different roles within the HR community, whether it's the recruiters or the sourcers or talent marketers, all the way into the talent management folks, because I realized what HR means within an organization. And so I did not have that perspective 3 years ago. Thank God I have it now.
So yeah, it's interesting. It's a shift because you were big. You were the IBM before, right? But prior to Phenom?
That's correct. Yes, I was.
And how long have you been at Phenom now?
I've been at Phenom just over 3 years. So it's been a pretty good run. I do get the pleasure, and I say this seriously, I get the pleasure of, kind of running the marketing team here. But I think, as most leaders admit to, I don't really do much other than get on calls and waste people's time. And everyone else on the team actually does the magic. So I look at my role as helping kind of anticipate and help us get where we need to get to, wear the thick skin when we need to wear the thick skin, and shelter the team, although I don't shelter up my team at all, but really enable them to do it.
That's good. So that lends a little bit of like, you're not necessarily in the honeymoon phase anymore for the space. You're kind of no longer are you a shiny penny. Like you've been doing this a little while.
I usually say to folks who come into the space, welcome. It's a lifelong study. And yeah, because the variation in our space, I think, is beyond the variation in many other spaces.
It's a variation of people, roles, what they have to perform, and even budgets. Right? The budgeting world in the HR side of the house is much different than, say, if you were in security and compliance, where you could pretty much keep writing checks because you could put it under, this is for security, this is for compliance. In HR, you have to really plan. That's what I'm seeing. You have to plan. You have to really be visionary.
Well, we have silos, JD. I mean, the fact is, there are many TA leaders who don't believe they're in human resources, for sure. And if given the choice, would move outside of it, except human resources defines itself by saying we hire.
From a budget standpoint too, don't forget the OPM standpoint, right? Like you got to be down with other people's money, and internally where they go literally door to door with their hat out, begging for money to help make the hires happen.
I'll tell you what, when you're defined as, hey, we make the hire, yeah, right now hiring is critical. But hasn't it always been critical for the past 30 years? And then you want to talk, oh my gosh, we have to retain people. Hasn't that been the requirement for the last 30 years and the importance? Like, I think the microscope is coming down because of the pandemic we've just been through, and the different now challenges we talk about as in the societal shifts and also the technological shifts. And it's not that they didn't exist before COVID, but it's certainly now been accelerated. And I think it's cool when you hear people say that the HR organization within a company is really the heroes or the champions. And when you look at it that way, it feels pretty good to be in this industry.
That's great.
Yes.
But and how did you, so we were going to talk a little bit about HR tech.
Yes.
Because this is the first in-person meeting for me in, 2 years almost. So it was an extraordinary experience. And you spent a lot of time on the floor out there talking to a lot of folk.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think, so if you're looking for a hot take, right? My hot take on HR tech right now, I would say our expectations going into it as a vendor, right? Our expectations going into that was, let's not go crazy. Let's not send 80 or 90 people that we would have traditionally sent. Let's scale it back. And we did, but we still probably sent 40 people. Like our scale back was still probably 40 people.
Not small.
Not small at all. And I'll tell you what, we had just enough. We had just enough people to handle all of the conversations. So although foot traffic was lighter, the quality of conversations with people, the energy, if you were on the show floor, was high. Very quality folks that attended. I mean, we had a blast this year. We thought it was great. And I think it's indicative of the great times that are going to continue coming from HR tech perspective.
Yeah, I think HR tech did a really, really nice job of caring for everybody's safety and peace of mind. I think they used the Clear app. For those who didn't go, they used the Clear app, so you had to validate that you had in fact been vaccinated. You had to have everything on. You had to have the lanyard on all the time, which is pretty typical, but you also had to have your mask on, and there were some people walking around sort of securing that. I think they did a really nice job. But I think, also to your point, this is the first time we've been anywhere since really the big lockdown. And I think the question gets asked about what's going to be next. So JD, you're talking about what's ahead. And Jerry and I have talked about this now for a week because we're wondering, do we just return to the same conference formats that we have been so familiar with and that have just been kind of the go-to rinse and repeat? Is that just going to come right back? Or do we think there's going to be something different that HR tech is going to have to do? Or conference is going to have to think differently about engagement, differently about audiences, differently about what they charge for attendance, for space, for speakers, and all of that. Do you have any insights sort of on that or where that's at?
I'll give you my insights. I'd love, Jerry, if do you want to take a first crack at this one, and I'll jump on?
No, that's okay. Go for
it. Here's what I think. I think if you look at kind of we call it like the last nuclear winter and the financial meltdown from years past, events just before that time period were awesome. In all industries, events were a really big thing. And that hit, and you had year or two down years of events. It took 2 or 3 years after that for event companies and event organizations to fully recover. And then we had another amazing run of events. You can tell I love physical events. Why? Because you get to connect with people, form relationships, have conversations in person. It is a great excuse to get out and about and actually meet people and have dinners and socialize. It brings, people don't realize this, it brings an entire industry of professionals together, connecting on the same thing. There is something special and meaningful about that. It is not just about me or you. It's about our industry. I think it'll probably take HR tech another 2 years to get back to where it was. And quite frankly, it might go well beyond where it was. And those numbers may actually start growing from an HR tech conference once again. But I think it'll probably take 2 more years to get us there. I'm optimistic about that, but Phenom will definitely be along for the ride and is excited about it. That's my take.
I think it's a great take. I do think there is a fundamental underpinning to how community forms that involves breaking bread. And you can define that in a variety of ways. It may be, more of an intimate conversation that you could have on a trade floor if you've got the right people, the right space, the right setup, et cetera. More often, it's what happens later in the afternoon or evening when people get together and do in fact break bread. And so, a number of the dinners that I go to and the dinners that we do for our members really are a critical and I think fundamental way that you start to build community. The question is, what do you do in between these meetings as well that fosters the development of that initial effort to build a community, and how you act and behave in between and how you build touch points, I think is going to be critical. I'm convinced we're not using all of the tools well enough to really understand how to not only start community in-person ways, but also to build and enhance that over time. And I think that lots of the vendors try to build it through doing webinars and a variety of other things. And I think we're going to see much more creative ways to develop relationships long term. And I'm convinced that that's going to be a fundamental part of how we develop that. And I don't know if the conferences will figure out how to do that. SHRM, for example, has over 500 local chapters. Now, a lot of people say, oh, okay, that's cool. But they've been doing it for a lot of years. It's another reason why they got 300,000 members. They understand the formula for how you develop connections that lead to 20 some odd thousand people coming to a conference, or at least used to. It was a much smaller conference this year. And so I think there's going to have to be, as we come back, a deeper thinking about what relationships are, what community is, and how that comes together.
Yeah, I want to jump in and talk about community for a second here, Jerry. Some of the things you're touching on, I think make total sense. And I want to give you an example from the show. I got a bunch of show examples, right? So we're at HR Tech, and another vendor came into our booth and introduced themselves to me. And they said, oh, we're marketing for X company. And I said, oh, that's awesome. How are you? You're growing. We hear about you. And they're looking at me funny. And I can sense, like, well, I'm not sure what I'm sensing, but this is odd. And they're like, well, you're the only vendor we're talking, because I asked, what's going on? They said, you're the only vendor that we're talking to that's actually talking to us like we're okay people. I said, what do you mean? And they said, well, everyone that we come to the booth, because they're marketers coming to other people's booth, they're treating us like we're competitors, and they're not talking to us as people. And I said, well, that's odd, and it's a bummer, because you're a marketer and I'm a marketer. We're a community of marketers, and I don't care if you're a competitor. I don't care if I've never heard of you before. It doesn't matter to me. If you're coming to say hi, I'm treating you as a person. It's a small world. It's a small world. Who's a competitor today is a friend tomorrow. Who's good talent today in another company could be working for you. I could be working for them. But it goes to your concept of how are we building people, relationships, and community. And we I think as humans haven't figured this out yet completely. But if we just step back and realize we are really in this together, and life may not be this big competition. Yeah, sometimes in the trenches, I don't like certain brands as a marketer, but at the end of the day, they're people, and we should stay connected because it's such a small world. And event companies, maybe there's a way they can tap into some of this human side to break down the barriers of just your competition or your friends. It's not always black and white.
Not an easy issue. I do like your attitude because I think that's one of the things that we focus in on. So, I mean, we have members who are competitors in the same industry, et cetera, who are very comfortable talking to each other and sharing what is not private, what is not proprietary. The fact is, we conflate what is proprietary in so many different ways that we struggle in talking to people as people about what it is that could lift all of us. And I think that's the difference that I see in an attitude of those who are focused in on community versus those who just have a job. Those in community recognize there's something bigger than all of us and all of our businesses in how we contribute to the space that we're in long term. And I think that's the satisfaction that you have in a career rather than in a job in which you are putting food on a table. And if we can elevate people beyond simply the satisfying that food on the table, we get to a point where I think we can all agree we're building community.
I think you've got, though, you're talking about from the conference standpoint, HR Tech was half the conference it used to be. And I don't mean half the conference, it seemed to me. I don't mean half the conference in terms of attendance. I don't mean half the conference in terms of, necessarily the number of people there or half the quality. I mean, this was literally the buyers outnumbered the sellers. It was incredible because most of the conversations, JD, your point, people coming by were not necessarily the folks you would typically be doing a demo for. You were talking to colleagues more than you were talking to potential buyers or business partners like that. So I heard a lot of people saying what you're saying, JD. I didn't hear anybody saying, oh my God, I missed the huge crowds. Oh my God, I wish it were more crowded. Or I wish I could barely get through the sales floor, the demo floor, and I wish I could wait in more lines for a demo. I didn't hear any of that. What I heard was I felt way more productive. I felt like I was way more engaged. And I met more of my colleagues, more of my industry folks. So to me, if I'm HR Tech, I'm thinking successful conference, different, very different. Would I have liked more buyers there? Of course I would. But there's an element somewhere in there that says, we might be onto something here. And it might be time for us to take another look. And I don't think HR Tech is alone. I think to Jerry's point, SHRM has done a very interesting job in these sort of localized chapters where they're still connecting and helping, because the folks that we talk to that are still members of SHRM are finding the majority of their value in those local chapters where they're connecting. So I would echo, JD, what you said, but I'll also throw in that when we talk to our leaders about whether or not they were going, there was no appetite to go. And a mixture of that, predominantly, primarily because of the pandemic. But there was a larger percentage of lack of interest, I think, in necessarily attending as a buyer than I think I have seen in the previous years. Now, will they go when the pandemic, God help us, when the pandemic is behind us and we get back to normal? Will the practitioners, flood back to this conference? I don't know. Will the appetite be a little different? I don't know. But I think there's an opportunity for everybody who's in the conference business to say it could be time for a nice pivot that leans in a little bit on the community aspect or leans in a little bit on the difference between the buyer and necessarily the service provider.
Two quick comments on that one. The first comment is I was sharing with someone else on a previous discussion that it was very nice that no one had to walk through the expo hall and say, excuse me,
There's none of this going on in the hall.
None of the bumping into people. So that felt good in a positive way. I will comment though, is even as we as a marketer look to pivot on our strategies, with the digital fatigue that everyone is having with virtual events and virtual meetings, we're still doing them, by the way, because there's value to the folks who we're communicating with. But we will even shift focus. We run our own physical event. It's called I Am Phenom. And so we did our last one butt up against when the pandemic hit. We skipped, and now it's like, when are we doing it again? So we'll have appetite. We're going to do one in April of 2022, but we're also planning to take the lead of the industry in what you're getting at and what SHRM has done very well, which is for folks who aren't yet ready to take the commitment of flying and moving to a very large event, you have to get to them in their cities, more local. You don't have to be perfectly local. I think you have to get more local. And you'll get some of the community aspect a little better. And it's getting peers that are, say, in the New York and Philly area, coming together, because maybe they'll take the train or they'll drive an hour and a half. right? And they'll want to be part of something because it's easier than thinking a week out of the office on airplanes, in airports. Yeah, not every company has the appetite. Not everyone has the travel budgets back. Like there's a lot of complexity there. And of course, let's not forget, people are still dying of COVID. So there's a factor that COVID is still here. It is still real and it's still a problem until that resolves itself and we figure out what we're doing and what our comfort levels are. We're going to have to keep trying different approaches. I like the community approach SHRM has taken. I think they are doing it well.
Good stuff. JD, thanks so much for joining us. We appreciate you jumping on the show. And anybody else who is still listening, we hope that we will see you at our upcoming book club. I'm not going to tell you what the new book is, but hopefully you'll head out to the website and you can take a look. We'll surprise you with that. But we're awfully anxious to get that going and see as many folks on there as possible. So JD, thanks again. Jerry, I'm glad you unmuted your mic today. It's nice to have you on the show.
Thanks for listening to the CXR channel. Please subscribe to CXR on your favorite podcast resource and leave us a review while you're at it. Learn more about CXR at our website, cxr.works, facebook.com and twitter.com/careercrossroads, and on Instagram at careerxroads. We'll catch you next time.